welcome back to Rants and Headaches. We have a lot to catch up on. So first things first, I have moved. I will probably at some point do an apartment tour. Right now, I'm just kind of in that place where it's like, I got everything unpacked, but I am constantly changing my mind about where I want stuff, so I have no idea what I'm doing in that category yet. But in addition to a tour, I will also probably just highlight certain spots where I want to film because I would like a little bit of feedback. This right here is kind of what I'm leaning towards. I like this little love seat. It's a great place for me to sit. It's not too small. I think it looks great up against my table. I'll probably add a few things to my table. I don't know how well that red phone goes. And I do like having a little bit of background light. I just don't know if that really fits. So you're probably gonna see me play around with several backgrounds. That's just one thing I've wanted to improve in my YouTube videos. Yeah, they're just talking head videos, but I'd like there to be a little bit more life and color in the background. So if y'all have any recommendations for this setup right here, I would really appreciate the feedback. And in the meantime, let's just get into some very uncomfortable recaps of 2022 and 2023. So 2022 was one of those years where I genuinely felt like things could not possibly get any worse for me. And in 2023, I don't know if I would say things got worse for me per se, but they did not improve in the ways that I hoped, I can tell you that much. So 2022, I was kind of conflicted most of the year. I pretty much made a decision sometime in 2021 that I would only work one full-time job at a time without additional part-times. I might do some gig work or side hustles or whatever, but I've worked 2 to 3 jobs at a time for most of my working life. And obviously, I don't have a whole lot to show for it. So in 2021 and 2022, I was at a job that wasn't terrible, but it didn't pay great. I was taking a break for management. I was making like $16 an hour as a line cook. Now keep in mind at the time I was renting a room, wasn't happy with that situation, but it was only $400 a month. So that income wasn't really killing me. But I knew I wasn't getting anywhere fast. And on top of that, there were just several things about my work environment that I did not like. When it gets to that point where just the thought of going into work gives you that just pounding headache where you're just like, I really don't want to, it's time to start thinking about other things. But just like with my apartment, I can be a very indecisive person. I held on longer than I should have, and that definitely hurt me in the long run. I want to say I left around August, somewhere around there, and I had a dream of starting my own business. It's something I wanted to do for a while. I technically did start this business, it just didn't really become official and get off the ground, because shortly after I left my job and started working to get this business started before I got my next job, I was in a car accident that pretty much took me out for about 2.5 months. My physical injuries on paper do not look that bad. There was nothing broken, and there was nothing life-threatening. But what that put me through emotionally and psychologically, it cannot be measured on paper. It was an absolutely miserable experience. There's no amount of money that makes up for it. There's no amount of time that makes up for it. I still am struggling with the trauma of this accident. Anyways, after that, I did decide to go back into management. I started, I want to say, mid-December as an assistant manager role at a fast food place. Now that had plenty of its own challenges in and of itself, mainly because the store they ended up wanting me to go to was a store that hadn't had management in forever, and I was basically supposed to be part of the management team that got this store back on track after basically years and years and years of just consistently going downhill. But I do think that it was good for me to be back in management. I do think it was good for me to have some of those challenges. I think I needed that. So once I really started getting settled into that job and getting in the swing of things started to somewhat look up for me in terms of where I was at mentally and the path I seemed to be on. But I also don't want to make it sound like everything was rosy at the time. I was still very unhappy with my situation. I was renting a room. I was making more money, but I quickly realized that money wasn't quite enough for me to move out and live on my own. And I just didn't like the environment that I was in. Really just boiled down to just very, very different lifestyles, and it just didn't work for me. But on top of that, I really have wanted my own space again for a long time. So getting to my own place was the ultimate goal. So even though it felt like I was kind of on the right path, there was definitely still a lot of stress going on. And then my cats, Gem, died. I had two cats, Rosebud and Gem. They were mother and son. I don't know for sure what happened with Gem. He appears to have passed away in his sleep. I had seen him maybe 8 hours prior to the time he was found dead, and he was in good spirits. He seemed fine. Nothing was out of the ordinary. So as heartbreaking as that was, I do take just a little bit, just a teeny itty bitty bit of comfort in the fact that it appears he died pretty painlessly. He was probably not even aware that he was dying. But that was just absolutely heartbreaking to me. Obviously very sudden and unexpected, but even aside from that aspect, just a heartbreaking thing to go through. And around that time I did kind of get a second wind, because once I kind of sort of got Rosebud through her mourning process, you know, I wanted her to have a companion, and my roommates basically said no, and I would much rather still have Gem here. But that was kind of a good wake-up call for me to have, that someone else gets to determine whether or not I can have a companion for my cat. That's just not something that I consider to be acceptable. That's not a life that I want to live. Absolutely not. Rosebud has always been a companion cat. She's never really been by herself or the only pet for very long. So I wasn't unhappy with my current job. There were a few things I didn't like, but you're gonna have that at any job. There was really nothing about the job itself that made me want to leave, but I really just felt like I've got to change my situation. So it is time to expand my horizons a little bit here. The good thing about searching for a job when you already have one is that you're not in a state of desperation. So in other words, you don't feel like you have to just take the first job offer that's thrown at you. You have the option to kind of take your time and consider what your choices are. So when I accepted the job I had now, it was down to this job and one other one. And I'm gonna be honest, part of me has kicked myself like every day for not going with the other job. Essentially where I'm at now is still basically restaurant management, but it's an entertainment venue as well. I've never done anything like that before. I've never managed anywhere that serves alcohol before, so I just felt like the fact that it was so different from what I'd done before was a really good opportunity for me to grow, which is the main reason I chose it. That being said, I was still in the running for a position that paid like $4,000 or $5,000 more, which I could really use right now, and probably would have been easier for me to transition to because it was much more in line with things I've already done. In hindsight, I don't know if it was the smartest decision. I went through a lot of turmoil the first couple months in that job, just feeling like, what did I get myself into? I don't know if this was the right choice. The main thing for me is that the support is always going to be important to me, and when it came to things that I never done before, the support was basically non-existent. And I'm not the best at winging it. I can kind of do it when I need to, but it really depends on what the task is. Like if I already have a skill set that I can kind of fall back on, like when it comes to the food aspect and that management aspect, I'm okay. But when it comes to the totally new things that I've never tackled before, I can't really wing it quite as well because I don't have some type of skill set to fall back on. So I went through a lot of back and forth with myself, wondering if I'd made the right decision, wondering if maybe I needed to just make some calls and see if something else was available. But feeling like I made the wrong decision was a major point of stress for me. Then as I was kind of getting over that part and settling into the job and kind of realizing like, okay, you know, I've gotten this far, let's just see where this thing goes. I think this is a good place for me to be. I found out that one of my family members was murdered. I will be the first to say that I was not very close to her. I don't want to misrepresent the relationship in any way, but just the fact that her life was just taken from her because she rejected a guy's advances, that's just infuriated does not cover it. But it's not just the fact that it happened, it's the fact that there is not justice for it, and it doesn't look like there's going to be. As of right now, it just seems that it's kind of at a dead end. So that definitely weighed on me a lot heavier than I even realized at the time. I just cannot get over how unfair it is. And then shortly thereafter, I lost Rosebud. And Rosebud was not quite as lucky as Jem. I had dreams for months leading up to Rosebud's death that I found her with a spinal cord injury and we basically just killed her on the spot. So I came home, I heard, it didn't even sound like her behind this bush. I was expecting to find a completely different animal, it didn't even sound like her. And the way she was wailing, at first I thought that the vines were around her neck, so I was like getting myself all cut up just trying to get to her. And then I realized that that wasn't it, and she was able to breathe, but she was panting heavily, and then that's when I realized that she could not move her back legs. Anyways, by the time I got Rosebud in the car, I had pretty much already accepted the fact that I was likely not going to be able to do anything for her, and the nearest emergency vet was 45 minutes away. Every bump in the road was absolute torture for her. Worst day of my life. So I did have to euthanize her. I had her for about 7 years. She was about 7 years old. I got her when she was a little bit, she was probably too young to be away from her mother, actually. But she was just abandoned, and this lady at a pet store had someone turn her in, and she really couldn't take care of her, and I had another cat at the time that needed a companion, so that's how our adventure started. And I really would have loved for both of them to be here for this adventure, and they're not. Beyond those things, there's just a few things here and there, but those are really the main pain points that I've experienced the past couple of years that have just really changed me, hurt me, broke me, you know. And now that I have my own place, I moved January 2nd, so it's been about a month and a half now, and now I'm going through this weird phase of just lacking motivation. They say that comfort is like the enemy of progress. So I guess that's kind of what I'm going through. Like, I finally have what I've wanted for so long, and I'm just in this rut that I can't quite get out of. One of the main things I wanted to do when I moved here was start cooking at home. Haven't really been doing that. I think I've gained a few pounds. I was already wanting to lose. I finally have my own kitchen just like I wanted, and I never feel like cooking. Never. When I had roommates, I complained about the house being noisy and it keeping me up and I couldn't sleep. Now I have a house that's nice and quiet, and I could not sleep almost at all the first month that I lived here. It was crazy. Perfectly comfortable bed. I get to control the temperature. No loud noises keeping me up. Just the right amount of night light in the room. Completely comfortable in my bed. Like, all the perfect right circumstances, and I just struggled with sleep like crazy. And I think the main thing is, now that I finally have a place of my own, I really want to just lounge as much as possible. And don't get me wrong, I kind of let myself do that the first few weeks, and there was nothing wrong with that, just kind of getting into the groove of things and enjoying my new space. But I'm now having trouble pulling myself out of that, and that has become very frustrating. Because I'm noticing now that there's also a very emotional aspect to it. At first I felt like, okay, I'm just being really lazy. But I think I'm also just dealing with a lot. The fact that the cats are not here, I think about that every day. It's, and someday I will have more pets, and I get that, but I wanted them to be here for this adventure. I wanted them to be here for whatever was next. So I just don't know if I'm ready for new pets. I also feel pretty lonely. My friend circle is pretty small. There are specific reasons for that on my part, but I really haven't put effort into finding new friends or building new relationships. I'm also kind of frustrated with being single, but I also just constantly feel like I'm just not really ready to be with anybody. For example, there's this guy I met several months ago. Perfect. He is so just special and amazing and awesome. That's the problem. He's perfect and I'm not. So that's out the window. What am I supposed to do with that? Nothing. And then last but not least, my financial situation is weighing on me. So I left my old job to get this current job because it would give me the income to get a place of my own, which I now have. But let's be honest, I barely qualify for this apartment, and I'm gonna start feeling it pretty soon. Now, a few years ago, like I said, I decided to only have one full-time job at a time or 2 part-time jobs. And look, I used to work myself almost to death, and I would be proud of that. And I felt like I'm working this hard now so I don't have to later, which first of all, that's really not a good mentality if you don't have a solid plan. There were a lot of situations that I thought would work out, specifically in terms of various promotions that I wanted, that just didn't come to be. And all of the work I put in was just, ended up being a waste of my time. And you don't get that back. But another thing that I noticed was if you take pride in your work, overworking yourself is not something to be proud of, and it's definitely not something that's going to help you in your career. Because at the end of the day, you're tiring yourself out more than you realize. You're making mistakes that you're not catching, that your coworkers and your bosses are definitely noticing. It actually does hurt your work ethic over time. Not because you've become lazy, but because you're constantly tired. And when you're constantly tired, you can't really give any of your 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 jobs your full focus. So if I ever do take a part-time again to supplement a full-time, I don't want to do it for more than 6 months at a time. I feel like that's kind of a good limit. That's also enough time to be able to put that entire second job's paycheck solely into savings or something specific that I want to take care of. That being said, there are some positions open at my current job, and I've just kind of been going back and forth with myself, like, do I want to throw my hat in the ring? Am I ready for it? I hadn't really thought about, up until about a month ago, how soon I wanted to move forward, if I wanted to move forward. And I definitely want to grow, and I do think I want to stay with this company for a while. I could honestly see myself retiring from this company. I don't know if that's going to happen. But I am happy there, and I do think it's a good company to work for. So I really need to kind of just hang in there for the next couple of months and see how things go. The thing about it is, if I throw my hat in the ring now and I'm told no, I don't think it's going to be too long before I will have another opportunity again. So it's really not the end of the world for me if I'm considered for promotion and end up not getting it. But at the end of the day, something needs to change. If I can't get a promotion, I will need to take a part-time job, at least for a good 5 to 6 months, just to build up my savings, have something to fall back on, because I am making enough to afford this and pay my bills technically, but I can't do anything else outside of that, and I really can't set much aside for savings. And that can be a recipe for disaster quick. There's a ton more that I want to get into, so there may be a second update video before I get into my regular content. Speaking of content, my goal is going to be to upload 2 times a month at a minimum. I don't want to have a set upload day because there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of things that may change schedule-wise in the next few months, so I don't want to commit to anything. Also keep in mind there will probably be some occasional just chatty, lighthearted videos and vlog-style type videos, because a lot of the stories that I want to cover are just very dark and very serious and very heavy, and I feel like I need things like this to kind of just break that up a little bit. Not really sure where my next video is going to be, so make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on. If you enjoyed this video, half this video, or even just a quarter of this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe.